Hello there, everybody. Welcome to our talk, Creating Narrative Visual Effects in Temtem. We're super honored to kick off the Visual Effects Summit right now. And yeah, without further ado, let's go. Let's show some magic. All right, of course, it's good to know who you're listening to at least. So my name is Kees. I'm a senior visual effects artist at Crema games. I started my visual effects career as a 2D artist working on Lethally Blaze, and eventually transitioned to a 3D real-time visual effects style, combining the 2D elements. And currently I'm a full-time animator on Temtem and also a teaching assistant and mentor at Visual Effects Apprentice. As you can see already from the pictures, I'm a dog lover. And for me, dogs are here, cats here. There needs to be some balance, of course, in the visual effects team. And I like to explain everything in sound effects.
Yep, okay, and hello everyone. I'm Miguel. I'm the lead VFX artist here at Crema, and so far I have developed my career mostly working in Crema and in Temtem, also some minor previous projects, but mostly that. Also, one of my main tasks within the team is to translate Kees' sound effect to the rest of the team, because you may know that not everyone speaks VFX language, so that's a thing. And also, whatever he said about cats and dogs, still under discussion, so we'll get to it. Okay, so for a lot of you that may not know what Temtem is a MMO monster creature collector that's with turn-based battles that are mostly 2v2 battles. It was created by Crema Games, which is a small Spanish team of around 30 people. And regarding visual effects, there have been 4 VFX artists in total, but never more than 2 at the same time. For us both, we've been working there, me almost 3 years, and Kees a bit more than 2 years. And yeah, we've tried to put a lot of emphasis on handling the different narrative of the different creatures that appear in the game. We also wanted to say that the game has been developed using Unity with its built-in render pipeline. Okay, and now Kees will tell you a bit about what can you expect from this talk.
All right, so of course you want to think what are the things we're going to talk about. So the main red line of our presentation will be the narrative aspect that we try to incorporate with our visual effects technique animations. So along this, we'll tell about the different tools we use to make this a reality. So we're going to show you the tool or the videos first without, then we're going to apply the tool and tell you what it does and how we think it becomes makes the narrative visual effects storytelling a reality. And we want to point out this talks for intermediate to experienced visual effects artists that maybe want to put a bit more emphasis on narrative storytelling in their visual effects work, because we think it's really important. And of course, it might be interesting for other art professions that actually want to start out as a visual effects artist. Are there actually any people in the audience that aren't visual effects artists? Well, maybe after this talk, you want to become a visual effects artist because it's a really cool job. And you could have already seen it repeated a few times on the screen along the presentation or during the presentation. We'll show you many different visual effects to kind of set the tone. And to set the tone already for the talk, over here you see one of our many Temtem called Drakash, not being smashed once, not twice, but of course 3 times by a giant pixel block named Turbo Attack. But of course, what makes it narrative, Miguel?
Yep. So what do we mean when we say that Temtem has a space for narrative visual effects? Okay, so Temtem has little gameplay limitations. We, of course, have some design constraints when it comes to how much damage a technique does, how much stamina it uses, the number of targets it has, but not really apart from that. This comes from the fact that the visual effects are mostly contained in 2v2 battles, where information that would be key in other games, can be competitive games like League of Legends, or adventure games, Souls-like games, that information is not really relevant for us. This means that we can focus and investigate a bit more into other aspects of the visual effects, like, for example, the narrative ones. We also wanted to say that since the game came out as an early access game, we've had a lot of interaction with the community. For us, this has been, I think, a privilege, because it's mostly been a lot of constructive feedback. Also, Temtem has a space for signature moves, and these are special moves that only one Temtem can use. And we've used them to further and deepen the different stories of a particular creature. Okay, so in here you can see the main 3 techniques that we're going to talk about in the presentation. From right to left, you can see Leech, Repress, and Cozinette. But for now, we'll let you wondering how do the sequences look. and we'll tell you a bit about our production workflow.
All right, so we think it's always nice to see how different games get created. So we want to show how it starts from getting an idea of a technique animation up until applying and thinking of gameplay details up until a final product. So what Miguel already said, we have little limitations in creative freedom. So we have done things like creating a giant black hole, sucking everything inwards, or a giant lava wall, which eventually pours hot lava over this little platyped, which is fine and is still fine to this day. I guess that's what happens when you let visual effects artists decide mostly what happens with visuals in the game. But how does it actually look? So we have some information on the screen. Of course, we have an idea. This can be a designer's a little story, like, hey, I got, for example, a lava wall and I want to pour hot lava over this platyped. Or we can even have like a lot of freedom that we can create even our own ideas. So for example, next up, we get some gameplay details. And you can see over underneath here, for example, we have Thunderstrike. Of course, what kind of typing is it? Electric, what is the category? Special, physical, what kind of damage does it do? Stamina and holds. And these little details I'll explain further down because we think gameplay details are very important to even begin, starting with the visual effects animations. Again, next time, for example, Fire Tornado. What kind of category is it? Of course, element fire. Much more damage. For example, you can see 2 holds. This will also depend on how long will the technique take. Next up, we have the concepting phase, and this really depends on actually the choice of the visual effects artist. Of course, we're an indie game, we're an indie company, so we don't have a lot of people in the company, around 30-ish people. So we don't have a dedicated 2D concept artist that helps us out. So what we like to do, we just draw our own concept art. So we like to draw like the keyframe, the biggest impactful keyframe of the technique animation. And this is a very fast way for the art director, lead visual effects artist to already discuss, within 15 minutes already, this is what we want. And it's really fast. We also think maybe sometimes faster than kit bashing in a way. And also little scribbles, like this Stampede scribble. And also, it's a very team collaborative effort that Miguel and I work together. So we constantly go back and forth over paints, timing changes, tune in little details. And that's really fun to do. Mm-hmm. But let me explain further down what the gameplay elements actually are. Because we do have gameplay elements or restrictions, but we have different ones than compared to player versus player games, for example. So we have the duration that you already saw in a picture, spectacularity, and some other elements. So duration, what you saw is we have 3 holds, and basically the bigger the hold or the more turns you have to wait, the longer the technique animation has to be on the screen. So we can have technique animations that we have to make visuals from 2 to 3 seconds, or the highest holds 8 till 9 seconds. So that's a very good thing to point out. Okay, we need to create an effect that takes 9 seconds. Next up, we have spectacularity. This is mostly based on the damage. Because if we make every technique 150 damage, of course, none of them would stand out. So we have some restrictions. Some techniques are 0 damage, some are 10 damage, and some can go up to 150 damage. And we have some other elements such as stamina. How much stamina does it cost to cast the technique animation? The priority, does it go first, second, third, or fourth because of the turn-based battle system? How many targeted numbers? 1 Temtem getting targeted, 2 Temtem, or the whole area, or the whole battle zone? And what are the conditionings applied? Is it poison, burned, frozen, and so on? So even in the end, it doesn't look like that much on their own. It's really a combination of all of the elements together that we can pinpoint, okay, how big does the technique get? But Miguel, can you tell us something about the unique game aspects?
Mm-hmm. Of course. Okay, so this will be the last bit of information before we dive into the techniques. And as for now, Temtem is at 12 different elemental types. Each, of course, with its own color palette and shape language. And we have water, electrical, fire, earth, melee, crystal, you name it. And we have developed these color palettes for each one that are useful for more things that you may think of. For example, for us, VFX artists, it's super helpful to have this as a reference to fall back to. And also, for example, Kees is colorblind for some values of yellow. And since we mostly want yellow electricity and yellow fire, even if green fire is cool.
Green fire is really cool.
But having this to fall back to has proven super useful. Also, the game is divided into main areas, as we call them the battle zones and the free roam area. The free roam area is where the game itself happens. It's where you find the other players, since it's an MMO game. It's where you find the NPCs, where the story itself happens. And then we have the battle zones areas. This is where the 2v2 battle happens and where we have developed most of our visual effects. And finally, Temtem right now is we have 164 different Temtem and more than 350 techniques. And if you think about it, this has been one of the hardest parts of developing visual effects for Temtem, because we have to consider that every technique has to look good on every Temtem, because every Temtem can potentially use every technique, and of course they can reset them. So we have to play a lot with the scale of the techniques and the different effects, because it's not the same if a small Temtem like this Platypus receives a technique, a middle-sized Temtem like this Balaj over here, or the super huge electrical mythical Temtem like this Volgan. Okay, so that was it for the information, and right now we'll dive into our first big technique that's called leech.
All right, so we have all the very important information out of the way that we even think of before we're starting, so we know, okay, how long does it take and everything. So let's talk about leech, and of course first, what's the narrative? How did it start? So let me introduce you to one of our many Temtem called Taifu. And we can say Taifu is a pretty big meme in the community. Because, well, Taifu is a meme. Why does T-Pose Taifu look like a dollar store scissor? Like once every couple of months, people are like, Taifu. And then after a few games, don't play Taifu, even for the memes. Taifu doesn't deserve to be good. Taifu deserves to be left in the dirt. So, of course, us as visual effects artists, I can look at everybody in the audience. When you're here from in this case, from a designer, hey, Taifu needs a new special signature move, so it's really special only for Taifu. Of course, we want to make Taifu matter, because who doesn't love this T-pose dollar store scissor? So when thinking of like an idea conceptualization, we think of, okay, what does fit the best and makes Taifu matter and be part of something bigger than the Temtem universe? And eventually we wanted to give Taifu the very nature godly feel that is like part of something bigger. Of course, we take much reference from games you have worked on, TV shows, everything we can take references of, anime also. And we thought a very fitting thematic for Taifu, a godly nature feel, was the Watcher from the What If series. I don't know if you've watched the What If series, but it's just the way it's looking at you. It's very menacing in a way. It's kind of like very godly, and we thought, well, we think this will be very special for Taifu. So here's a little sneak peek, and let's dive into it actually, how we actually started out and what are the tools and techniques we apply. So first of all, we're going to talk about with leech's spectacularism. I'll say spectacularity because I stumble constantly over the word. Time remapping and Temtem battle shader effects. So first up, spectacularity. So you already heard us say a few times, Temtem is a turn-based battle game. So what we really try to focus on, we need to keep the players engaged, because we can have technique up and animations up till 9 seconds. So we want to really capture those hype moments, because we create games for the players. So every time they use a skill, they're like, yes, I want to maybe use that Temtem only because of the skill. That's actually our goal. And we want to make it really matter and fit the whole Temtem story itself. So first, for Taifu, that's the leeching part. And also what really works the best for it is mostly anime, because anime timing is really great. It's very snappy and it's constantly engaging in a way, like the colors, everything is working. And we can really put a more emphasis on the thematic. We can give it much more power, really increase power of punches and everything together. And we really think that works great for leech and the technique animations. Next up, we have time remapping. And in this video over here, we'll show you the video actually without the tool applied. We'll tell you what the tool actually does. And then afterwards, we're going to take a look how it looks with it applied. So what is time remapping? So with time remapping, we're able to slow or speed up time with time curves that you can see on the left bottom over here. This is actually a very artist-friendly way for us to efficiently try out different things, like maybe we kick in a very slow motion kind of feel, a very speed up kind of feel. And we can give the technique 10 times more power with it. So Just imagine for yourself, you're looking at this technique GIF. How would it look if it's very linear? It would lose a lot of power, a lot of anticipation. It kind of misses that hype moment and that anticipation moment for the players. So by just really increasing those curves, we can really give that a very spectacular feel to it. And we can say what gets affected by it. We can say everything gets affected in the scene. We can say the source animators, so the source Temtem is getting affected, the targeted Temtem, or we can say all the Temtem in the area. So we have lots of possibilities if you think of it. So let's do a refresh for the mind how it looks without time remapping. And these can be some pretty small details actually. So the narrative is there, but it's kind of missing that juicy feel. It's kind of like the oomph of it. The really like, oh, it's coming, and then bam, it explodes. So let's see how it looks with time remapping. And it can be a slight detail that some of you might not really recognize in the beginning, but for us, it's really adding on top of that extra animation feel. So Taifu casts its skill, it builds up, it goes in slow-mo, and it rapidly increases over time to really show Taifu leeching the life source out of the enemy Temtem. And for the last two of Leech, let's talk about Temtem battle shader effects. And you can already get a question next to yourself, or, hey, Kees, why are there two floating eyes and some swishy swooshies, solar coasters, curve meshes? Yeah, you can name it what it is. We call it solar coaster for now. Let me explain actually how that works, Temtem battle shader effects. So here we show Taifu in the Unity editor scene. And the cool thing we can do with Temtem battle shader effects is we can place Temtem clones. And you heard me say clones, and Miguel will tell a bit more about clones eventually. But what we can do is we can set custom parameters during the animation timing of the technique. So during the 8 seconds, we can say we want to increase the Fresnel over time, the texture speed, the power of the glow, and everything. We have lots of possibilities with this. And we use it again with the curve meshes. We showed you the curve files. But we can do other things than only giving Taifu the nature godly feel. We can give a Temtem a digital feel that is a distorted hologram. We can go more to nightmare field kind of effects like nightmare feed. We can even glitch the Temtem like it's stuck in the matrix and offsetting the vertices so much for digital type effects. And we can send out an extra Temtem clone with a battle shader on it, and we really portray the power of, okay, the Temtem is getting punched, bonk, it goes backwards, and it's like an aura shader that we apply to it. So again, what does it do for Taifu? Without the Temtem battle shader effects, two floating eyes, some swishy swooshy solar coasters, it's missing something. But with the Temtem battle shader effect, it comes all together, the narrative is there that we think we really try to give Temtem Taifu that very nature godly feel. And it's a really cool tool we can do lots of things with it. And let's see how it looks actually when we have all the tools combined and with some sound effects on it, and see how it comes to a whole final product. And you might also notice at the end of the effect, we let some particles linger so the player can already register for, okay, this Temtem just got attacked, because sometimes there are maybe 4 of the same Temtem in the battle scene. So with the first big technique out of the Leech, Miguel, can you tell something about our next mental technique called Depress?
Yep, definitely. Okay, so after Leech, we are diving into Depress. This one is a mental technique. It's a damaging technique that requires the target to be asleep for it to work. So given the name of this technique, we wanted to try and recreate those kinds of feelings and emotions that you may get when you're going through a bad time. Our narrative idea for this technique was that if we were able to implement in some sort of way our own feelings into the game, then the technique would be more fitting inside the Temtem universe, but also outside of it, and the players would be able to relate more to it. Okay, so that's why, let me show you the technique. As you can see, the enemy Temtem goes into some sort of personality disorder, where it sees itself out of its own body and some particles that play with it, and then it gets pulled back together, also, but of course it's damaged. Okay, so in here, we're gonna talk about our main tools that we made to make these techniques stand up, that are the extra Temtems or clones, as Kees just said, and of course post-processing. So for these extra Temtems or clones, what these are, they are copies of the Temtems that are within a technique, and we can use several different animations for them. We can use animations that they have in their battle zone kit. That can be, for example, the get hit animation or the attacking animation. But also we can use some animations from the free roam area. This in addition with, for example, some more basic animation that's just position, rotation, and scaling. We can create techniques that have sufficient narrative meaning just with that. Like, for example, you can see a lot of running Temtems. That's the stampede scribble that Kees showed you earlier. Also in the GIF, you can see this technique that's called Oshidashi, and you can definitely see the impact that being able to animate this Temtem has. Without it, well, the punch would feel a lot like powerful, okay, because we have the impact frame, we have the time remapping, but it will feel much less powerful if we didn't launch the Temtem up into the sky. It also helps us to give some comedic effect, because as you may have seen, Temtem visual effects lean into some sort of comedic or funny effect. And you can see that little star up in the sky. That's like, okay. Okay, and next up, you can see the effect this one has on the press. Without the extra Temtem, you can see some particles floating around, but you don't understand why the Temtem has disappeared. You don't really get where it is, and it has no narrative meaning. On the other hand, when we put it back on, you can definitely see that something's happening to it. We also use well, basic animation principles like this squash and stretch, so you can understand the violence of the pullback and the pullback together. Okay. Also, post-processing. Maybe for some of you that may not know what post-processing is, it consists of some filters that are applied in the last stages of rendering. And with it, we can use, we create some effects like vignetting or changes of contrast, bloom, etc. So in Temtem, we are able to modify the current post-processing that we have at any current time within the technique animation. And we can have two of them overlapping at the same time. This means that we can have, for example, one handling a change of bloom and another one handling a LUT color swap of the full screen. We can do this also with curving files that Kees showed you earlier in time remapping. So this is a very artist-friendly way to do it. For example, this would be some LUT textures that we created for post-processing. And with this, we can portray, for example, the violence of an explosion in this technique that's called knockback blast, with these full black and white values, well, color, sorry. We can also portray, for example, an electrical field with these blue and dark blue values. And also, we can create that feeling that you may have had if you had an electrifying massage, maybe. But yeah, for example, here we get a full black and white color swap of the full screen that, in addition with an inverted Fresnel on the enemy Temtem, we portrayed that that thing that we may have seen in a lot of animes where the skeleton gets shown when you get electrocuted. Okay, we've also created an Uber shader for post-processing because sometimes we want to handle more than one thing at the same time. For example, if we have overlapping stuff in time, it's easier to do it in just one file and not have to move it around. And you can see, for example, how we handle in the right part of the screen vignetting, in the middle part the kinetic lines for some super fast techniques. And up there is the LUT color swaps. Okay, so getting back to the press, you can see the effect this one has. So without post-processing, you can definitely feel that something's missing. The transition feels a lot more bland, and we're missing something, yeah. But when we put it back on, you can definitely understand that you are going into that sort of mental state where the damage could happen, and suddenly it gets a lot more narrative meaning. Okay, so now let's show it with sound effects, of course. So yeah, you can definitely see the projectile finding. Then you get both copies or both personalities pulled back of the Temtem. The projectiles are the particles that are playing with both copies, and then the violence pullback. So you can definitely understand that life will never be the same again for this Temtem. Okay, so next up, this is the end for the press, and we'll tell you about our next big technique that's called coziness.
So our third big technique is called coziness, and maybe the wording is a bit wrong because it doesn't look very kozu for little mosu. Yeah, we can all agree about that. Fun fact, actually, if we show our work in progress videos, we cast all the different technique animations on all the different small Temtem because we think it has the most impact and sells the idea a bit more. And a lot of our actually colleagues of us were like, no, the little Temtem. So, all right. So what is the narrative of coziness? So with coziness, we really wanted to portray the feel of the Temtem getting pulled into the layer of arachnite, a spire Temtem with the typings digital and nature, where arachnite crawls down and eventually feasts us on this little snack called mosu. And yeah, it's we treat them with love, don't worry. So what are the things we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about actually two very important things that we think are very special when it comes to Temtem, is camera movement and BZ chains, battle zone changes. So you can already see in a video over here, it's not shippable. The camera has an error or something. So let me get you through it, how the camera movement works and what we actually can do by adding extra movement on already everything that's there. So yeah, it's quite unique being a visual effects artist for Temtem because sometimes we have our own ownership that we come up with our own idea. We create it from the beginning up until the end. And it's really, I think it's really special that we can do that. But also with this comes camera movement, because camera movement is very important because we have the time for it with the turn-based battle system and everything. So we can really create interesting camera shots and camera positioning or camera positions. But how are we doing it? So we do it again with the curve files. It's a lifesaver for us. We can do, for example, animate the field of view curve of the camera. So instead of only doing screen shakes, we can create extra wobbles. So think of, for example, a very climactic explosion. It goes boop, 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 and then it explodes. Those are kind of like the things we can do with field of view curves. And we can go all out and just have a lot of fun with it, actually. Next up, we have curvings of different cameras. So camera A and B. And we have all kinds of freedom from how can we move camera A towards camera B. So we can create shots of the cameras and how is it transitioning, or when is camera B kicking in, maybe camera C, D, E. We have lots of cameras sometimes. And during this actually approaching 1.0 of Temtem, it actually released last September, there was one colleague of us, Adri Devonio Andres, we call him the shader god. And he had one thing, like one sentence he constantly repeated to us, and we want to share it with you. So this is Adri. And Adri always told us, let the camera follow the effect. And why is this actually? Well, this way it looks like the player is naturally getting guided by the visual effects instead of an almighty being controlling the camera. What if, Taifu? So what do we mean by this? Let's go, for example, through some examples. So over here you have unseen blow, and you can already see something, and I'm letting the first run of GIF again. Yeah. And you can already maybe see something is that when a projectile starts, we first let the player register, okay, there's something happening with the projectile, but we only let the second camera kick in when the projectile is halfway through the trajectory. So this way the player knows, okay, I need to take a look at the projectile. Okay, the projectile is going to do something. It's going to damage the other Temtem. Because if we instantly let the camera move towards a target, the player doesn't know what to do. And it's kind of, we're forcing the player in a way. And the player is like, oh, I'm maybe not really together with the visual effects and the projectile movement of it. Over here, you have the coziness itself. So you can see also with the line how the camera is moving. So first camera moves down. We do the anticipation also, like it's really building up to that hype moment, like da 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 da, and it goes back to the normal battle zone area. And what I was talking about, building up to that climactic explosion with field of view curves. So this is one technique called DG thread. So the camera is zooming inwards. We really increase that field of view power, and it's like we're holding a moment a tiny bit, and then it kicks in, it zooms very far actually inwards, and we show that, yeah, the Temtem is damaged by quite an amount of damage. So let's see again for coziness how it looked without the camera movement actually. So arachnite is casting the skill. And of course, there's something wrong. It doesn't look shippable at all. But let's see actually how it looks with the camera movement. So Eric Knight is casting the skill, crawls down like Spider-Man, and eventually feasting on his little snack called Mosu. So with camera movement out of the way, let's talk about battle zone changes. And you can already see this is not the final battle zone. This is actually our visual effects test scene. It doesn't look, that great. So let's see how we can make it even better. So what are battle zone changes? Battle zone changes are custom Unity scenes where we hand place all kinds of different assets that are actually at our disposal. And we're doing it to really capture that because we do mostly the battle zones for signature moves that are special to one certain Temtem. So we can really give a Temtem like Eric Knight, a Temtem like Leech, like Taifu, much more meaning to the overall, the skill of it and what it does. So what we did, for example, we created a giant spider web that's actually like the focus point leading with the shape language, the lines to the middle, that little Mosu, there's something going to happen with the enemy Temtem. And with that, we also added some environmental effects. So we give the feeling of the players inside the spider cocoon, and there's something going wrong, and it's definitely going to go wrong with the enemy Temtem. But also with this, if you think it yourself, we have lots of possibilities with this, because the Temtem universe for us is very big as visual effects artists. So what are some other things we can actually do with this? We can create a toxic wasteland, a stone dune and trench environment, a more martial arts melee environment. And we can even summon a stormy sea where thunder and tornadoes appear, just a bit like in the Netherlands, where it's constantly raining. And trust me, I am from the Netherlands. It's constantly raining. Actually, also in San Francisco this week. So you can already see like we're having loads of fun also with this, and we just kind of can go all out and just use all kinds of different things and the whys and the how of a meaning to a scene. Because why are we doing it? We're doing it to give, again, Eric Knight that special feel that maybe people want to play the Spider Tem because we can cast our enemy Temtems in a giant spider cocoon. And how are we doing it? We're using basically everything at our disposal that we can use. So if, for example, some 3D artists created some very cool environment art assets, we think we can use it in a way, create some interesting composition and camera shots. And if that works, we use that actually. So a refresher for the mind. How does it look without battle zone changes? So again, you can remember the normal visual effects test scene. It's not fitting at all. It misses the whole point of the technique. But with the battle zone change, there's already a more meaning to it. The narrative is there, and just and capture that moment of a spider Temtem. What could a spider Temtem be? And lastly, let's see how it looks with some sound effects, because we think adding sound effects, getting added to the visual effects, makes it a whole picture and become a final product. And there's also one thing I want to point out is that with certain techniques, we favor some cameras on the right side and the left side. This is more because when a camera is favored on the left side, it could be the friendly team. And when a camera favors the right side, it's the enemy team. Because what I told you again, some Temtem there can be two of the same Temtem in the battle zone. So this is like a small cue for the players. It's like, okay, the enemy is using this skill right now. So with our third big technique out of the way, CozyNet, we have one more thing that's very important when it's getting applied to our technique animations, which is composition. Can you tell us something more about that, Miguel?
Yep. Okay, so as you've been seeing, Temtem techniques are a little bit like small cinematics or like mini movies. And we've tried to learn stuff like, for example, for animated series or movies, and put what we've learned from them to use. We, of course, try to live up to those standards, and we have tried to implement this, like, for example, with a low-angle shot to portray a Temtem as much more powerful, or even just the opposite. Like, if we portray a shot from a super high position, and it's a small Temtem in a super big environment, then that Temtem suddenly feels super weak. We've also tried to put two things together. Like, one thing was that what Kees said, that the camera has to follow the effect. And the other thing is that the visual effects have to guide the eye. This is really important for us. So let me show you what I mean. In this technique that's called crystal deluge, you can see that we try to, at first, the visual effects, the camera following the effects, sorry, because we don't start moving the camera up until the VFX have left the camera shot. And also we have that triangular shape, so we make sure that the player is looking downwards. Also that way the transition feels a lot more natural. And this is important because in composition in Temtem, we don't want the player to miss any important information. And we've tried to do it, and it's been one of the hardest parts of developing VFX here. This just would be a sketch of the triangular shape I was talking about, and you can see that the effect has already left the screen. This next technique, that's called unseen blow. You can see what Kees was telling about earlier, that we don't start moving the camera up until the projectile is like 50% on its way over the enemy Temtem. In here, we put our higher values in the projectile, so we make sure that the player is looking, well, of course, at the projectile, and that they are looking at this action line. And finally here, this is the signature move of Wasp Spin. That's a Wasp Temtem. And we do portray the Temtem as more powerful with this slight low angle shot at the beginning. And also with that conic shape that we do upwards, we make sure that the player is looking above and behind the Temtem, because of course the first time they see the technique, they are not gonna know what's gonna happen, but at least they know where it's coming from. So they are not surprised and they're like, okay, I wanted to look there, but in a way we're making them look there. So this would be the action line that we want the player to look at. And yeah, we are getting close to the end of the presentation, but not quite there.
But wait, there is more. So let's do a small recap of what we talked about with the 3 techniques: leech, depress, and cozynet. We've talked about things such as time remapping, adding spectacularity, Temtem battle shader effects, Temtem clones, and so on. And we really think we have many more tools, but we think these are the most important tools that we can go actually all out and capture that narrative feeling of the technique animations. We also think even in the sliders, this could also work for you, because narrative visual effects meaning is very important, we think, and to give that, maybe that's the basic explosion, a bit more meaning to it. But, of course, but wait, there is more, because we're all visual effects artists, there are lots of visual effects artists over here. Imagine what we can do with this. So, with that out of the way, can you tell us something about the divine god called Pig?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the signature move, this P Temtem, that's called Pig. And let me tell you the story for this one. So since the game came out as an early access, there was a lot of interaction with the community. And some Temtems in the beginning, they were super overpowered, like insane. And it was the case for this Pig Temtem. And of course, since it was so powerful, people started comparing it with a god. And like shortly after, this was all around in the Discord, okay? And shortly after, of course, the Pig charge was born. That was a thing. And we wanted to give back to the community in a way and try to put what they showed us, put it in the game. So let me show you. Okay, so of course this is a meme for us, but we also wanted to make it look good for the players that weren't there in the beginning. But yeah, I think it's been super fun developing VFX for this game. You can also see that we've used all of the tools that we've been talking about, like for example, the time remapping, overlapping post-processing with that vignetting and chromatic aberration. But yeah, next up, we'll tell you a bit about another technique that's called horror.
Yes. Yep. So approaching 1.0, we kind of got like super comfortable with the Temtem IP. I think we can speak for a lot of people that when you get at the end of like a stage for a DLC or a game, you're really trying to push yourselves. Okay, we got all this. Let's create some crazy things actually. So what we try to do with the mental technique, especially because fire is fire, electric is electric, but mental can be lots of things. It can be depersonalization with depress, for example, or it can be something in your mind, like something affecting your amygdala. Think of games such as Bloodborne, stories of H.P. Lovecraft. I'm myself a huge fan of those. I was like, let's see how we can really put maybe Temtem in the Temtem universe, and let's summon the depths of Cthulhu and put it in a Temtem jacket that it fits the whole narrative of it. So we summoned a giant tentacle eye floating, looks like a raid boss in a way to give that feeling of composition. Oops. Oh, sorry. To give that feeling of composition and the menacing feel that the Temtem that's in the mental realms. Oh no, I'm not going to be the same after this anymore. And what we did was we sent out a pulse of mental powers when upon impact, tentacles burst out with toxic viscous goo splashing towards the player's screen. A next technique is called outgrowth, or first when it started, drain climbing plant. And this was actually a technique we came up with our own, the whole idea was up on our own. And the designer was told us, okay, sure, you can do it, good luck. And then afterwards, oh, okay, how are we going to do this? So this technique is for one of our mythical Temtem called Tyrannic, which comes from the fire volcano environment, and its typing is fire and nature. And what we wanted to encapture with this technique animation was the full force of nature ramping towards the enemy, creating a tree of life and eventually exploding in nature colors and nature schematic. And a bit of flavor of Naruto Wood style jutsu. So for this technique, it was a real team collaborative thing. And again, our shader god comes back, Adri de Vonjo Andres, created a root shader because this was very a necessary thing for us that we needed. So I'm going to explain you actually how we set it up and how we made this possible, this effect. So first we needed some custom meshes that we created in Blender. And you can see some red vertices painted on these meshes. Maybe some of you already know how the root shader works, or like how you how you let the roots grow in a way. But these vertices determine the thickness of the root, because again, shape language is very important, and we want to get rid of the symmetrical shapes in the technique animation. So it feels more natural, and the roots really feel natural in a way. Next up, we have a basic shader that actually Chromium made over here, together with Adri. And these cover things such as Fresnel, for example, a texture panning, because that's a very important thing also together with the roots. And also, of course, the root growing in a point actually, instead of being cut off, because then it feels more natural and believable to the players. We painted our own personal root tileable texture. And you can see over here how we try to implement the roots hand placed again with the battle zone chains that we think really fits the camera movement and the battle zone and the composition for the battle zone changes. And it's also nice to see how it actually started, because this was the first color scheme. But of course, the narrative is very important, but you can already guess it. Tyrannic comes from a fire volcano layer, and its typing is fire in nature. So it leads more towards the orange colors, the more brighter colors. So we changed it up, totally. And it took a while, of course, but these mistakes can happen in game dev. And I think everybody makes sometimes these mistakes. And let's also show you the first ever draft of Outgrowth. And there are some important things I want to point out afterwards. So you can already see the camera movement is there. The composition, everything is there. The roots are basically working, but it's very cluttered. You don't really see where you have to look. The color scheme is all wrong. But this actually shows that camera movement is really a key into our visual effects animations. And that, yeah, a lot of signature moves, we just even start with camera movement. And on top of that, we add the visual effects layers, so we make it easy for ourselves. Next up, Miguel's going to tell us more about the black hole.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we've been saying, sometimes the ideas for the techniques came from the designer or our CEO, Enrique Paños, who was the one that created the techniques. But other times, the ideas for the techniques came from either ourselves or more tech part of the company. So this was the case for black hole. In this one, we wanted to try and recreate the moment that you could feel, we think, inside a black hole, of course. That's you hear nothing, you see nothing, there's nothing happening. So let me show you. Yeah, so that was that. And yeah, we also did custom post-processing here. That's, let me show you, actually. Swirling distortion in the middle to also portray that feeling that everything's been sucked inside the black hole. You can see it right over there. So yeah, that also helped out a bit. Okay, so this would be our last technique. So Kees, will you do me the honors here?
I can. I think we can speak for a lot of people, and this technique will speak some volume actually. And we've all experienced this like maybe every week, 3, 4 times, 5 times. And if not, well, you have a very special computer actually. So let's just let this technique speak for itself. Yay, blue screens. Who doesn't love those?
Okay, so, well, what we want you to take from this, of course, we know that you have to be in this sort of position where putting this in your game makes sense. But if you're to take anything from this talk, it's that in some cases, less is more, okay? Because you see that this is literally one big blue billboard and a sad face, and it has a lot of narrative and comedic meaning. So we think that if you're able to implement, well, maybe any of that, even in the sliders in your own games, maybe you can benefit from that. Okay, so thank you all so much for coming. This was the end of our talk, but we didn't want to leave before saying some shoutouts, some thank yous.
So, of course, we didn't create Temtem on our own because, yeah, that's just not possible. And we want to just want to give some huge shout outs to the team back in Madrid. Each and every person is super talented, and just working with such a team that has so much passion for the Temtem IP is just great. And that we can share our visual effects work with them is just an amazing opportunity. Also, we want to thank our bosses, Enrique Paños and Guillermo Andradas, for believing in us, letting us give this talk, and just having trust in us as representing Temtem, the IP. Also, Alex Munoz and our shader god, Adri de Vonjo Andres, during 1.0 and just working on Temtem techniques. The feedback sessions were just super into detail with animation to time, shape, language, everything. Shaders also helping out, and it's just for us a really valuable people that have really helped us out a lot. And Jason, where are you sitting? Jason, thank you so much for reaching out to us to give us the opportunity to give this talk about Temtem and creating narrative visual effects animations. It's actually our first time going to GDC and our first time in America, so it can be quite overwhelming. But just sharing, because we're also quite new in the visual effects industry, and just sharing how much fun we have creating visual effects and how we can also do other kinds of visual effects and narrative visual effects. It's just amazing to share that. And of course, lastly, regarding the GDC team giving out the important information about travel documents and everything, it really helped us out a lot. And thank you especially Sam Warnke for replying so super fast. So with that out of the way, actually, there is a little Temtem that has actually a question. And that is, are there any questions? Thank you. Yeah.
All of this was made in Unity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's at the mic, that could be possible, yeah. Yeah, it could be, I think that's best.
I'm a little short. Excellent talk, thank you. I wanted to check, what were the main points of collaboration you had with the wider team? Like what departments are you mainly collaborating with?
So the main point with the wider team, like the collaboration. So I think especially with Adri de Vonjo Andres and the art director, really wanted to capture that the Temtem style of the visual effects fits the universe. But for example, also with the sound people that created the visual effects sounds, they also sometimes ask us like, hey, what is actually your feeling with this technique animation? Because sometimes the ideas come up ourselves. And I can think also with game design, when we created Outgrowth with the roots moving forward, we had this idea and we showed a concept. But of course, then the designer is going to ask, oh, how many targets does it have? Is it 1 target, 2 targets? How long is it? Because if we make technique animations too long compared to 50 damage, then players would just be, come on, again. Sometimes that happens.
Yeah. I think, well, since it's a rather small company, in the end, we've had a lot of interaction with every department mostly because, for example, some techniques, I can think of the Change Muncher's rec. That one, the animation team did the animation for that one, and then we put on the visual effects. Also, sometimes the 3D department created some of the environments. So in the end, actually a mix of every department almost.
Like, for example, a monkey getting animated, jumping up with 2 giant rocks and smashing it downwards. Yeah. Those kind of things. So it's really cool to create effects for that.
That's super cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Hey there. First, it's like really impressive you built this game with 30 people. Like, hats off to you. That's great. So you guys obviously have like so much creative freedom to like build these effects for your Temtems. So like, where did you checkpoint yourself in terms of like budgeting or memory usage or time? Because you could build environments, you can build shaders. Like, what kind of went on with that process?
Yeah. So where do we build the budgeting, timing, everything? Well, I think for optimization, the hardest thing was for example, the Nintendo Switch, because we have lots of billboards that are just full on in screen. So you can already imagine the overdraw. So when we optimized for the Switch, it took a long time because we want to capture that feeling that it feels like very rich, the effects, but doesn't lose the glow and everything in the shapes. And that was pretty difficult. So
yeah, we had to kill our Uber shader that we had for PC.
Oh yeah,
and just build like several super minor shaders that work for that. And also regarding time, I think our mostly we did every technique within 3 or 4 days. Of course, some took more, some took less.
Outgrowth took 2 weeks because of the color change and everything, and slight colorblind values. I was like, okay, this color, so no, that again, back and forward, but that happens. That's
yeah. And a follow up: do you guys use the visual effects graph, or do you guys use particle systems, or do you guys use like what's the core for what you build?
We use Shuriken because it was with a built-in render pipeline, 2019.4 version.
Gotcha. Cool. For example, like the roots we animated by hand with the animator, because you just have control in the way the feeling control. Like you have to feel and it's okay. How can I really? When the root grows, it goes like, it bursts upwards and you let it hang and then so when it goes. Yeah, kind of like how they do it in Naruto and like the animes. That's like very timing feeling.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
I was curious about how you went about deciding when to trade off between keeping the animation as satisfying as possible and how much time the animation takes. Because I realized that sometimes, take the animation as good as it can look, you need a certain amount of time. But after a certain point, you're making the player wait a certain amount each time they play it. So how did you go about deciding when it needed to be this long or when it needed to be shorter? And what did you do? Like, what was the thought process when you had to make those trade-offs?
We can use Lava Wave as an example. Yeah. So regarding timing and how long do you think a technique animation should take and how we decided. So we have the holds. For example, so 0 holds is 2 to 3 seconds and 3 holds, so how long the technique animation holds before getting cast or possible to cast, it's 9 seconds. But we have, for example, the giant lava wall that you saw with like platypus standing there, and eventually lava will pour over the Temtem. First, that technique was 15 seconds or so, 13, because we had like a whole concept art that the lava walls appearing with a camera pouring like over the lava wall, looking downwards. Then we follow the lava following downwards. And then our shader god, Adriel von Andres, he was like, it's 15 seconds. It's 2 holds, so it needs to be 7 seconds. So we had to just cut off like half of the technique animation and still make it work. So sometimes it's also try and error. Because we have loads of fun, but sometimes you forget, okay, this takes too long. Players are not gonna like this.
We got too excited with it.
Yeah.
And also, if you think about it, like if it's a 3-hole technique, it's gonna be seen much less. So because you have to wait 3 turns to use it. So in the end, we balance it out. Like a technique that's 3 seconds, maybe you can use it 3 times. So in the end, it's 9 seconds. And one technique you can use it once every 3 turns. It's 9 seconds. So it kind of balances it out. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And yes.
Thank you so much for doing this talk. It was really nice and really cool to learn about. And I was wondering, for your concepting stuff, what are you guys trying to like focus on with that? Are you more like color theory stuff, or like, I guess just what's your focus with that?
I think when I started out at Temtem, I'm a huge advocate of overpaints for visual effects artists, because for example, when you're a smaller team, you don't have concept art. And I think it's, for example, kit bashing sometimes might take a bit longer, and just drawing it out, even a little sketch or just full out sketch, 15, maybe up 20 minutes. It just shows in one shot, this is what we want. We don't do like some techniques, we do the charge part, the impact part, and then the ending part, and we concept it out, but we never go longer than 30 minutes in a way. Mm-hmm. But this is just, sorry, what was the question again?
Oh, just like your focus for the concept art stuff.
Yeah, so with the focus, it's like to capture that main impact moment, the highest part of the technique animation.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hello. I have a question about your gradients and your gradient management system. How do you iterate making new gradients? Let's say you make a new attack class or damage type. And then also, how do you balance that against your very vibrant and colorful environments?
Like, do you mean, for example, how do we tackle our color gradients? For example, LUT textures?
Mm-hmm. The what, sorry?
The LUT textures.
Well,
we can, for example, with knockback blast, that you saw with the very black and white flashing frames that you're really building up to the anticipation. Sometimes we invert the colors by accident, and it's like, oh,
that's cool.
That's cool. And then we use it for loads of other techniques. Mm-hmm. But yeah, with colors and everything.
Yeah, and other times we just, like for example, if it's an electrical field, we think that we have to go for those blue or bluish dark blue values. So in the end, it's mostly going back to our color palettes and applying that to the technique. Also, of course, if it's something super particular, like the electrocution thing, we have to go for references outside of the game. So it can be anime references or other games, of course. So yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. No more questions? Right, cool. Thank you so much, everybody. That's all.